Osteoporosis Support Group for September 2023, where we'll be talking about osteoporosis, fractures, and posture, and what exactly is good posture. So our roadmap for today, we're going to review the osteoporosis definition, learn signs and symptoms of compression fractures, practice safe postures in different positions, and practice exercises to help lift safely. If you've been with me before, you've seen this, or maybe if you were with here now, you saw this 5 minutes ago. Our bone density score is negative 1.0 and above. That's our normal bone density when compared with someone at peak bone density. Negative 1.0 to negative 2.5 is osteopenia. Osteoporosis is negative 2.5 or below. And then severe osteoporosis is negative 2.5 or below, plus a broken bone. And again, I like to remember that it's not osteoporosis that's the risk fracture or risk factor. It's the fractures that result from osteoporosis, which can make things a little bit tricky. So let's take a closer look at our fractures. Our major sites are wrist fractures, usually from a fall on an outstretched hand, a hip fracture, which is also most frequently from a fall, and our vertebral fractures. They're compression fractures. Sometimes they're called silent fractures. Let's take a closer look. So for our compression fractures, 1.5 million compression fractures per year are due to osteoporosis. 25% of postmenopausal women have compression fractures due to weakening bones. About 60% of women who have a compression fracture don't even realize it. So that's where that name, the silent fracture, comes in. So if you can see the picture in the upper right-hand corner, and if you can see me, I've got this picture or a little model of the bones here. We have what we call the vertebral body, which is the thing that looks like a little square in the picture. You have that space between, which is the disc, that yellow thing, which is the spinal cord, and those little pokey bits on the side, they're called the transverse processes. Process is just a bump on a bone. It's not really a process that something goes through. So that's the transverse process. And on the back side, you have the spinous process. So that's just a different part of your vertebra. When we talk about the compression fracture, it's actually that square bit, that vertebral body, that it gets compressed at, we call it the front of the vertebral body, the part that's away from your spinal cord on that little square. And sometimes those little discs, they get compressed, right? And so that would be like squishing the jelly in the donut just a little bit with that compression fracture. And so here's our lovely Justine. She's meditating on her bones. I'm wondering, how can a compression fracture feel? Well, sometimes it feels like nothing. That's that silent component. Sometimes it feels like back pain that occurs suddenly or it worsens over time. Pain or numbness in the legs. Back pain that gets worse with standing and walking. Pain that can be felt with coughing, sneezing, laughing, or deep breathing. It can also be movement-based, right? Pain or difficulty with twisting or bending. Tenderness over a specific area of the spine. Or for different things, maybe increased difficulty with breathing or difficulty with digestion, because compression fractures, they can end up putting more pressure on our internal organs, making it harder for them to expand, for the lungs with air or for the stomach with food. What can a compression fracture look like? So on your body, it may look like a stooped over posture. You may have a loss of overall height, or you may gain a belly with no change in weight. Now, take a pause for a moment. Some of us may have some of these symptoms. Some of us may have many of these symptoms, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a compression fracture. Of course, we know that gaining a belly, you could have a food intolerance or digestive disturbance, or it could be, hormone related, loss of height. We talked about those discs. All of us with age are going to lose height, right? These discs kind of deflate. The jelly leaks out of everybody. They get firmer and less buoyant over time. So we will all shrink a little bit. And of course, there are other orthopedic concerns that could contribute to some of the other symptoms that we talked about. So posture is one of the things that we can look at, some of the things that we might be able to change. And every time I use this picture, I look at my posture in this and I kind of cringe because my posture is not that great in this picture. So we do have certain causes of poor posture. Something as simple as your bed. Maybe it's not giving you the type of support that you need. On the other hand, it could be stress related. It could be a foot issue. Maybe your shoes aren't the right shoes for you and you're not getting the support that you need, or maybe you're getting the wrong kind of support. It could be a muscle imbalance or a muscle weakness. It could be negative personal image. You know, if you're having one of those days where you feel like you need to curl into yourself, your posture naturally goes down. It could be, again, workplace stress, whether it's physical or emotional. A poorly designed work environment or repetitive stress duties. You may have had the experience where your screen is over here, but your keyboard is over here. So you're kind of looking off to the side for a long period of time. Even that can have an effect on our posture. So warning signs or effects of poor posture, you could have fatigue, you could have achy muscles, stiff joints or immobility. You know, if you've ever sat like this for a long time, you know, maybe the back muscles get overstretched, the front muscles get a little extra tight. So that can be also helped by improving your posture. So we wouldn't be an osteoporosis group if we didn't talk about our falls. We know that it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Our posture affects our falls risk and our falls affect our posture. So if your posture is a little more forward, you may be more likely to trip and fall. Your center of gravity may be shifted. So that just means we have to be a little bit more careful. And of course, falls can affect posture, not only because of the fractures that we spoke about early, but also because usually when we've had a fall, we become a little bit more afraid of falls, which unfortunately, being afraid of falls is a risk factor to having more falls. And we know if we're afraid, our posture tends to change. So again, there's this big feedback loop that we can interrupt by making sure that we practice our balance exercises. And you'll see I've included on there your flexible posture, your fixed posture. There are two components, right? Your fixed posture is just what you can't change through age, through time, maybe, you know, the way that you were born. We're all born with a certain type of skeleton that we can't change. But there are flexible components. You might notice that, you know, sometimes if you get a little tired, you lose your posture, but you can take yourself out of it for that flexible component. And of course, we can always prevent our posture from getting worse. We also have a look at our posture in our exercise positions. We'll get a chance to practice these today. The three main positions we'll talk about are supine, lying on your back, seated, and standing. So to start off in supine, lying on our back, the points of contact, we want our head against the floor, using a pillow if needed. If you do already have that increased thoracic kyphosis, if your upper back is a little extra rounded, if you're lying on the floor, you're going to need a pillow to help protect your neck and to make your exercises more comfortable. So whatever position, either a pillow or on the floor, we want our shoulders to be in contact. We want our hips to be in contact, and we want our feet flat, hip distance apart. The exercises that we'll practice today are our heel slides and our bridge. And if you've been in class with me before, you know I love the hands pressing into thighs. It's an isometric exercise for our abdominals. So for the next posture in seated, we want our feet flat on the ground, or if you're on the short side like I am, maybe you want your feet on a block. We want our hips above our knees and keeping the natural curves of the back. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I've been talking all day. Get a little dry. We want our heads over our shoulders. So we'll practice our seated narrowing and our seated row.
Terribly sorry.
Okay, so for our posture in standing, we go from the ground up. Our ankles ankles and knees are stacked. Our hips are over our knees. Our shoulders are over our hips. And then our head, we want that to float on top. Think even weight on both feet. And often, especially when we're in standing, when we talk about our posture, we think that we have to throw our shoulders back and stand up tall. I always tell my people, check your hips first, because if you're flexed forward at your hips and then you're trying to bring your shoulders back, you might just be putting extra stress on your neck. So again, and we'll review that. We'll do that with our side leg lift, our standing heel raise, and of course, some balance exercises. I almost always include this one as well, our exercises to avoid with osteoporosis. We want to avoid our rounded spine abdominal work. So anything like your sit-ups, your crunches, the Pilates 100 with your chest lifted, as you can see, that puts your body in that forward flexed posture, right? That puts too much pressure on the front of your vertebra. We also want to avoid loaded spine flexion. So roll over in Pilates, yoga plow. If your feet are over your head, that's not a great choice with someone for osteoporosis. Also, and I'm going to flip into profile here, our forward spine stretch, that puts a little bit too much pressure too. Again, you can see on that front of the vertebra, that will make you more likely for a compression fracture. When it comes to deep twists, I think these are challenging for anybody. So not a great choice for anybody, but especially our friends with osteoporosis. If you're doing that deep twist where you go as far as you can go and really, really crank it, that's just so much pressure on your discs, on your back. We love rotation, but we want it to be that active rotation where you can bring your body without forcing it. Right? And of course, pressure on your rib cage, rocking on your belly, anything like that. Pilates Swan 3, where you're rocking back and forth. That can be too much pressure. So you can always modify with a pillow under your rib cage if that feels better for you. So we talked about our exercise positions, but so important, we are made to move, right? These seated and standing postures are a great starting place, but only staying in these postures will be too much too. So I said this before we even started our recording today. If you need to shift around, if you need to move, please do that, because that moving, that shifting, that stretching, standing, sitting, that will help take the break. If you're sitting in what you think of as perfect posture for an hour, you're just as likely to come out with some discomfort as well. And of course, we can apply these principles to our lifting. So today we'll talk about a kneeling lift, a deadlift, a squat, and a golf tee lift. Keeping in mind, you may not do all of these today. You may not do all of these ever, right? These are all good options, but it depends on your body and what you are lifting. So we'll go over a deadlift. Here you can see we've got flat back, wide stance, connect the shoulders, and lift up. Imagine that you're lifting up toward the ceiling. Okay. For our squat lift, you think sit back, right? You still have your flat back. Here you'll have even wider stance. Your shoulders are still connected, and then we stand up. Now I'm going to go back to the deadlift for a moment, just so we can do a comparison of that first picture. Here, I'm sending my hips back, but I'm sending the hips back and my knees are pretty much in a fixed position. When we go into that squat, I'm sitting down, right? I'm sending my hips down as opposed to back, getting a deeper knee bend. I get a lot of questions on that, so I wanted to give you a visual. Going into our kneeling lift, this is one that is not the right choice for everybody, but it can be a good choice for some. We're going to that 90-90 position. We go into our flat back, we connect our shoulders and lift up. And the last one, golf tee lift, light objects only. You can see I've set my heavy box down and now I'm just picking up a yoga block. This is like you need to pick up your shoe from the floor, that type of thing where you lean over with your flat back and stand on up. Okay. And again, scrolling back through, flat back is in every one of these lifts. And connect your shoulders is an important component as well. So when we get to our exercise portion, we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Okay. So for our lifting guidelines, always keep the load close to your body. Again, keep your back straight, which is essential for those of us with osteoporosis. The last one is the hardest one for me personally. Take multiple trips. If you're unpacking a car or you went to the grocery store, you do not have to take everything in one trip. Take multiple trips and just think of it as more natural exercise that your body is getting. And for our don'ts, like we talked about before, do not twist your body, especially when you're lifting and carrying something. You will lift your body and then you will turn your feet as opposed to turning your back. Super important, for example, when emptying out the trunk or something like that. And again, don't lift more than you can handle. Okay. So again, we reviewed our definition for osteoporosis. We learned signs and symptoms of our compression fractures. And now we're going to practice our safe postures in different positions and practice exercises to help us lift safely. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and we're going to get ready to move. So like we talked about from the beginning, a sturdy chair or a wall, an empty or a light box, a pillow if you need it, a small towel, and room to move. And stopping my share. Okay, so let's make sure everything is all set up here. And we are going to start in our supine position, lying down on the floor. So if you have a yoga mat, this is a great time to do it. Or like I said at the beginning, if you just want to watch along and then watch the recording again to practice these exercises, you are more than welcome to just watch along today. I'm going to move my stool out of the way. So as folks with osteoporosis, the most important thing to do is practice how we get down on the floor, right? We need to do our log roll. So we set our hands down, we get our feet over to one side. We're going to slide down onto our side, and then we roll onto our backs. So here, now we can feel those postures. Your head is in contact with the floor or a pillow if you need it. Your shoulders are down, your hips are down, and we have our feet hip distance apart. Okay. So some of these exercises, depending on your fitness level, may be too easy, too hard. Just do your best with it. And you know what? I'm just going to confirm. I think somebody might have come off of mute. Okay. Just let's mute all. There we go. All right. Here we go. So I'm going to do my log roll right back on down. So we start here. We'll take our hands and place them on our belly. This exercise is for our abdominals. We take an inhale. As we exhale, we straighten out one leg, making sure our belly stays strong and doesn't move. When our leg is straight, we take another inhale. As we breathe out, we bring that leg back in using your abdominals. And even if you're an advanced exerciser, this is a great one to do either as a warm-up or just as a check-in with your body to make sure that you're firing equally right and left and that you can do this without changing the shape of your back. Let's do two on the other side. Take an inhale, exhale to lengthen, inhale, exhale to drag it back on in. Good. One more time. Inhale to lengthen, And imagine your leg is dead weight. If it feels really easy to move your leg in and out, chances are you're using your leg muscles a little bit more than your ab muscles. So let's try that one more time on each side. Imagine your leg is like asleep and you need to call on those abdominals to drag it back in, tightening on in. Good. Inhale, sip of air. Exhale, push out. Inhale, sip of air. Exhale, drag it in. Excellent. All right. So now we're moving on to our next exercise, the bridge, which is a great one to do for strengthening. And I'm just going to tuck in my shirt here for a moment. So there's all sorts of different versions of the bridge, right? I'm going to do the version I don't want you to do first. And that's the yoga bridge. Again, the yoga bridge is awesome for what it is, but here I'm kind of arching my back a lot, and there's a little pressure on my neck, and I'm not really strengthening my hips or my glute muscles. So what we want to do is the flat back bridge or the hip bridge, where we find our glute muscles, our hip muscles, and we lift our backs off the floor, lift our hips off the floor, coming into a straight back position. Now, depending on your flexibility, you may not be able to lift straight up. That's okay. If you lift a little bit below, I'm totally fine with that. I want you to feel like you are being strong. And of course, if you're an experienced exerciser, if you're like, yes, I know bridge, I love bridge, I want you to try our single leg version today with one leg up in your Pilates tabletop. Two more. Good. And then lowering it down, switching over to the other side if you're doing that single leg bridge. Two more. Good. All right, set your hips down, set your feet down. Give your tail a little shake. If you've been in class with me before, you know I love this next exercise, the isometric. March one leg up into tabletop. So you have that 90-90 position, and you're taking your hands and pressing your hands into your thigh. So we talked about how the abdominal bicycle is not a great exercise for somebody with osteoporosis. Let's switch sides. Here, we can activate those obliques without straining our backs. We're pushing our hands into our thigh as hard as we can, and we're using our abdominal muscles to resist it. Now, I often say that this is the exercise that never gets easier, you just get better at it. So option one is to do one leg at a time. If you know you can safely come up into a Pilates tabletop, you can bring both legs up and you can push both hands into both legs. And you can see I am shaking, you can hear my voice shaking. So if you push lower down towards your thighs, that's a tiny bit easier. If you push higher up towards your knees, that's a little bit harder, right? Because of that leverage. Making sure that you inhale as you release, exhale as you push in. Let's try that one more time together. And then we'll set our feet down. Let's give our tails a little shake. And again, I know this is not the most comprehensive exercise portion we've done in this class, but this is to really nail down our postural positions. So our next position is seated. So we're going to log roll up. We use our feet to roll over onto the side, use our hands to push us up, and then to come into standing, we have a number of options. My chair is nearby, so I'm going to show you the friendliest one first. You bring your chair nearby, you bring one foot up, and you just kind of do a lateral slide over so that you're sitting down comfortably. Of course, you can always do the stand up off the floor through that lunge position if that works for you. Whatever works best for you. Okay, so let's have our towels nearby. That'll be for our next one. For the postural component, as I mentioned, I am on the petite side. So if I sit in this chair proper, my feet are nowhere near the ground. What ends up happening is we end up getting a little discomfort in our back. So for me to sit in this properly, I either have to scoot forward or put a yoga block under my feet. And in fact, that's what I do at home when I'm sitting on the couch. I always have something under my feet so I don't feel like I'm straining my back. All right, so but for here, I'm going to scoot forward. I've got my feet settled down. And in our gyrotonic classes and our gyrokinesis classes, we have this concept of mirroring, which is a perfect way to get in touch with our posture. We have even weight on both feet. We have both of our sit bones down. And we have this sense of an internal lift. So now I'm going to slump down. And then I'm taking my hands, putting them on either sides of my pelvis, and imagining they're magnets that could come toward each other, which help me find, this like little internal heights. You can also imagine that you have two magnets coming in from the front to the back to help you find this lifted seated posture. And I'm looking at you all, and you all look really good right now. I just saw everybody look like just a little more confident. It's fantastic. Okay, so this one can be tricky to hold for a long period of time if you're not used to it. So if you need to relax from this, you can. Or if you want to stay with me, you keep that sense of narrowing as we go into that row. So we talked about the concept of connecting our shoulders when we lift up things. I'm going to flip into profile here. So when we pick up stuff, sometimes our arms slump down, and you can see when my shoulders roll forward, that kind of pulls my back into a rolled forward position. And we definitely don't want that to happen. So we do what we call connecting the shoulders. And in Pilates, we call it kind of plugging the shoulder in. And I don't want you to feel like you have to squeeze your back super hard, but I do want you to feel a little energy, like you could almost pull those shoulders just a little deeper into the sockets. So let's use, I know some of you have TheraBands, some of you have towels, both work great. If you do have a TheraBand, make it extra zesty so that when you pull on it, it's not going to move too far. Yeah, maybe you want to fold your TheraBands in half. Yeah, all right. So I have my things like just about shoulder distance apart. I'm going below chest height because I know if I go too high, you can see how I'm getting like that shrugged up shoulder feeling. So wherever your body says, oh yeah, I can leave my shoulders away from my ears. Imagine you can pull your towel apart. And this is where the towels work great because they're not going to move, right? You are just getting this sense of a lot of work, but you're not going anywhere. And that's what it's going to be like when you pick something up. Now, of course, with your TheraBand, it may stretch a little bit. So again, you might want to double it up just to see what that feels like, but you'll see. And then from here, our shoulders are connected, right? They're not all the way forward. They're not all the way back. We get this sense of energy. We're pulling those towels apart. Hopefully your arms are getting tired. Mine certainly are. And then we start to row. We pull in, keeping that pressure out, and push out. Yeah, and I see some of you don't have a towel, and that's totally cool because you're getting in on this row too, feeling that tension through the muscles. Imagine you're moving through the heaviest molasses. Yeah, there you go. Pull it in. Awesome. And push it forward. Now, if you're using a towel, by now your shoulders should be making themselves known. Even if you're using a TheraBand, if you're keeping that tension as you push out, keeping that tension, like your TheraBand should be very taut. Yeah, there it is. One more here and forward. Now, of course, when you're picking up a box, you won't have that same degree of tension, but you will get that sense of connection in the shoulders. So your grocery bags don't pull you forward. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of my towel. I'm going to get rid of my chair. You're welcome to keep your chair if you know you can use it to help you out in balance as we get into our standing exercises. I'm going to move my stool over to the side, and I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay. All right. So here, I'll untuck my shirt too, try to look a little more presentable. So feel free to hang on. We're going to start with our standing side leg lifts or a standing abduction. If you've done a Pilates class, this is like the side kick series, but we're doing it in standing to help out with our balance. So for our posture, we have our ankle, our knee, our hips, our shoulders are all lined up. And now for my hip on this side, this is my tricky hip. I know if I try to lift too high, I'm either going to bend at the waist, tip my body, or do something kind of funky. So everybody's body has a natural finish point with this one. Sometimes we try to turn out our toes, which it lets us lift higher, but we're not getting that work into our glutes. Yeah, good. Excellent. Yep, imagine that this bum is pulling in, you're lifting off of your hips. Good. Two more here. And then we'll set our foot down. Let's go over to the other side. You're setting it up, ankle, hip, knee, shoulders, with your head floating above. Sometimes I keep my hand on my glute here to make sure that I'm doing the bulk of the work from the hips. That'll help out if you always get like really, really fatigued calves during balance exercises. Give yourself a reminder that your bum can do a lot of this work. Good. I see lots of folks not hanging on to stuff. Nice job. Two more here. Good. All right. So we'll set that down, give our hips a little shake. Again, if you need to hang on, please do. We're going into a standing heel raise. We're lifting up and lowering down. So this is a little balance, and that's a lot of strength. Good. And down. And I'm just using my hands to mimic what the feet are doing. You don't have to do it, but if you like it, you can. Now keep an eye on my this sided foot. I mentioned this is my tricky side. See how this ankle is going all the way out to the side? Yeah, that's where I'm letting my ligaments do the work instead of my muscles. So for some of us, we have really flexible ankles. And I encourage you to think maybe go 75% of the way up if you know you are one of those flexible people, or if maybe if you're not sure, or if you have any ankle instability, because you know you'll be staying in the muscles. Yeah, one more here, as opposed to stressing out your joints like that. All right, shake out those calves. And we have our final balance challenge. Again, if you need to hang on to something, please do. We'll start grounding down our foot and we'll float one leg up. So this is our option one. Good. Option two, we go into our cactus arms. Option three, we can turn our head. Good, yes, gets a little trickier. Option four, we can turn our body. Remember, we said that active rotation, and this falls into active rotation, right? Anything that you can do with your muscles is totally fine. Good. And if you are rotating and you're like, yeah, I'm totally cool, go ahead and try closing your eyes. That'll get our last little visual system there. Nice. All right, set everything on down, shake it out, and we go to our other side. Grounding through your foot. Stacking through that bun, letting your shoulders and head come easy, floating up. We lift up our leg. We cactus it out. Maybe we start with our head turns. Woo. Maybe we start with our body turns. Maybe we're closing our eyes and doing all of those crazy things. If you can, more power to you. Good. Holding for 3, for 2, and 1. Beautiful. Set those feet down, shake it on out. All right, so that is how our standing postures can relate to some very familiar exercises. Now, for our last part, we're going to look at those lifting techniques that we talked about. So I'm going to get my box. My box is right over here. Yeah, if you have a box, go ahead and grab it. A very, very lightweight bag will also work. I mentioned that because again, I don't know your bodies. If this is very new to you, I do not want you doing this with a heavy weight or a heavy box, just to make sure that we're getting the postures correct first before we add in the load. All right, so for our deadlift, we said hips back, right? So this is that hip back portion. Kind of rock with me here, stick your bum back, and then bring it on in. Yeah, good. And I know a lot of us have tight hamstrings. Sometimes my hamstrings are super tight. But always with my deadlifts, I use a knee bend because I feel like it helps me practice or protect my back. Some people do love stiff-legged deadlifts, which is great as an exercise. I think a little less practical when you're lifting up things. So let's practice just your standard deadlift. So we walk up as close to our box or our load as we can. And we connect our shoulders, right? We practice that. We know what that feels like to have strong shoulders. We send our hips back with a flat back. Good. Yeah, you all look good. And then you find your box. We keep our box close to us as we stand up. Good. Yeah. Let's set it down. Send your hips back. Good. Keep your box close to you. And I see one of you, thankfully you don't have a box, but your arms came all the way up when you stood up. Pretend you have a box. Keep them close to your body. Yeah, there you go. And then go back on down. Good. So all of the power, it's just like our bridge, comes from those hips. Nice. Send it back down. And this was one of a very, very good question we had before we started. Today, you can see I'm not wearing shoes because my box doesn't weigh anything. When you're lifting weights, please wear shoes. We don't want you to drop a weight on your foot. That's bad news. Okay. So that was our deadlift. Another option is our squat lift. So for the deadlift, my feet are usually like right about here. That feels good for me. For a squat lift, you can go a little wider because you can see you have to lift it less, right? Here I'm this tall. If I widen my stance, I get a little closer to the ground. So when I turn to my box, I'm gonna flip to the front for a second. My feet are kind of peeking out on either side of the box, right? And I'll turn back around again so you can see me in profile. Again, we are still walking right up close to that box. We connect our shoulders. We know what that feels like. And now, instead of sending our hips back, we're thinking, sit down in a chair. Sit down, grab your box, stand up. Good. Yep. Sit down your box, stand up. Good. Yeah, and I think a couple of you have a really small box. So if for this one you want to practice just the kind of the squat portion, that's okay. I think logistically you just have to do a deadlift because your box is tiny. Yeah, there you go. All right, so again, let's try that. Connect the shoulders, tummy in, sit down in the chair, grab your box, stand up. Yeah. Sit down in the chair and stand up. Good. So again, is one better than the other? It's whichever one works best for what you're carrying and what works best for your body. For some of you, the deadlift looked really, really easy. And for some of you, the squat looked easy. So feel free in the practical world, do what feels easiest. In the practice world, in the gym, in your sessions, do the one that feels harder so you'll get better at it. And speaking of hard, I think this one's the hardest one that we'll do, the kneeling lift. So I'm going to face you straight on for a moment. First off, we have to get down to the floor, right? So we're down in this position here. And I'm going to flip to the side. I'm in what we call 90-90. We've got a 90-degree angle here, a 90-degree angle here. So this isn't going to be like your Jane Fonda lunge where your leg is back there. You will never get off the floor, or if you do, kudos to you. So you bring your legs in, you tuck your toe under. Try this one without the box first if you've never done this before, and definitely hang on to the wall or hang on to a chair. This is harder than it looks. We stand up. Yeah. Okay, show offs. Yeah, you guys looked great. Let's go back down to the floor. So then you can try to take your box along with you. Again, keep that box close to your body as you stand up. Awesome. Yeah, for some of you, this is small potatoes. For some of you, this is like, oh, wait a second, this is a little different than what I've done before. We also have that option. Again, you'll know if this is the right option. You can go box on top of your thigh and then stand up, right? And then you kind of hug the box right into your belly. Yeah, that looks good. And then on the way down, good. And of course, because we're going over exercises, we're going to try the other side, our less good side, I'm assuming, because that's what I did. I did my easy side first. Yeah, good. And then back on down. You can give it a try, both versions. And again, if this is totally new to you, you do not have to do all of these. This can be a very hard exercise if it's your first time. Yeah, good. And we'll do just one more. Okay, we can set our boxes out of the way and grab your light object. It could be your towel, it could be your TheraBand. I'm gonna grab an exercise ball because I think it's a little easy to see on screen. Now we're gonna do that golf tee lift. Normally we say, don't use momentum, don't use leverage. But the cool thing about the golf tee lift, as long as your back is flat and straight, you can use leverage just to make it easy. Of course, if you want to make it into an exercise, you can do that single leg deadlift. But let's go through all of those options. You have your foot down. This is only with your light objects because you imagine like you're putting that golf tee into the ground. You reach down, whoop, and you stand up. So there's a little balance component too, right? This one's sneaky. Let's try that. We'll get rid of our object, sink it down, and stand up. Nice. Aha, yeah, second round always goes a little bit easier. I'm gonna do my other leg, give you the outside leg view. And this time I'm gonna try to put a little bit more muscle into it. The first time I just kind of did whatever my body did. So I'm staying close to my body. I'm lowering slowly. You can probably see me shaking a little bit. And then I'm slowly standing back on up. So that would be the biggest difference between doing it as an exercise versus just picking your socks up off the floor. Lowering down slowly and standing on up. And we talked about a lot of us have hamstring challenges. You can keep that stability leg bent if you want to. Doesn't make it necessarily harder or easier. It just might make it more accessible for you. Okay, so those are our lifts. We had our deadlift, our squat lift, our kneeling lift, our golf tee lift, and of course, as a bonus, our best friend, the log roll to get up and down off the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and we're going to go into our question and answer session. For those of us who could only join us via the recording, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.